So hi guys and welcome again. And the web scraping project will be a separated project, so we need to start from scratch. So I have already created new directory called Playwright Scraping. And first we need to init the project and install the dependencies. So open terminal and first type npm init. And now we need to fill the information. So for the package name, we can leave it as a Playwright Scraping. As a version, again, we can submit the default value. Description, here we can put something like web scraping with Playwright. Entry point will be index.js, that's completely fine for now. Test command, leave it blank. No Git repository. And we can add some keywords, for example, web scraping, Playwright, that can be enough. Author, you can type your name, license, just leave it, and now type yes and hit enter. And as you can see, we have a package.json created with our information. And now let's install dependencies. So npm install. And in this case, we will be not using Playwright test library, but we will be using just the Playwright itself. So install Playwright. And also you can choose, for example, Prettier, but this is optional. And I think this is enough, so hit enter. Now again, just wait until everything is downloaded and installed for us. It should be a little bit faster than Playwright test. And as you can see, everything has been already done. And in the package.json, you should see Playwright and Prettier. So let me now configure my Prettier file. So I'll go to the root of the project, new file, .prettierrc. And I'm just gonna again set semi to false and single quote to true. And that's it. This is how my prettierrc will look like. Again, if you prefer different settings, feel free to do it your own way. This is just my simple example. So I'm gonna close Prettier. And I think that's it. We have created and set up our project. And in the next video, we'll take a look at the node scripts which will be required to run our scraper. Let's now continue with creating a scraper script. So in our package.json, I want to create two scripts. One, to run the script for just one time. And second one, to actually run the script in a loop, because sometimes it can happen that your scraper will get detected and blocked from access to page. But if you run it in a loop, for example, 2, 3, or 5 times, there is a big chance that your scraper will at least one time pass and then bypass the securities and scrape data. And for that, I'm going to show you both examples. So first is to simply run the script for the one time. So let me change the name and give it, for example, name scraper. And here the node script will be node scraper.js. And we don't have scraper.js yet, so let's just create a file. So in the root of the project, create new file and name it scraper.js, or let's say TS, so we can use TypeScript. And here I'm simply do console log. Let's use very well-known hello world, and let's see that our script is working. So if I open terminal and type npm run scraper, it should say hello world to the console. And as you can see, we have an error. And yes, so of course it's scraper TS, not JS. My bad, so changed it to the proper naming and run it again. And as you can see, there is a hello world displayed into console. So now let's create a script to actually run the scraper for, let's say, 3 times. So I'm gonna create new script and I'm gonna give it name scraper free. And now follow me. The script is actually pretty simple. We need to create a for, so it's for run in. And now we need to set, if we want to, for example, run it 3 times, it needs to be 1.3. So this is a typical script if you want to run it for a 3 time. If you want to run it for 5 times, just change this 3 to 5. But we want to run the script 3 times, so I'm going to do this. Semicolon, and now do, and now we need to pass it this script, so node script.ts, semicolon, done. And that's it. This is the simple script to actually run the scraper command for 3 times. So let's test it out. So npm run scraper free. And again, we have an error. So what I have done again, of course, it's not script, it's scraper. I actually have no idea why I do so much typos here. So it's scraper.ts. So run it again. And now, as you can see, it has run hello world for 3 times. If I, for example, change this to 10, and run it again, you can see we have hello world displayed 10 times. So let's change it to 3. And again, if you want to do a loop, or if you want to just use the loops in Node scripts, not just for this web scraper, but for any of your project, this is the code which you should use. Again, create a for loop, specify how many times it should run, then do name of your script file, in this case it's scraper.ts, and after that just pass done, and that's it. So let me clear the console, and our scripts are ready, and in the next video we'll start working on our scraper and file and browser and everything about scraping. So finally it's time to start writing our scraper. So let's close the package JSON and let's open our scraper.ts and remove the console log, and I have already done that. So now we have an empty file called scraper.ts, and the first step we need to do is to require Playwright. So const Playwright equal require Playwright. And again, we are working with Playwright and not the Playwright test, because we need to use the library to automate the browser, and we are not need or we don't require the testing functionality because we will be not testing the website. So next we need to create base URL, and let me just show you what we will be automating or scraping, and that's GitHub topics Playwright. And if you take a look on the GitHub, we have this nice cards with Playwright project, and each of the cards contains the information, name, the author, and a lot of information. So the great idea to learn Playwright scraping is to scrape Playwright projects. So let's take the URL and let's save it as the value. So make sure you don't have any typos. It's https github.com/topics/playwrights. So now we need to create our async function. So if you are not familiar with the syntax, just follow me. We need to start with a semicolon, async, function like this, oops, and here goes the code. And first we also need to do the catch part. So at the end here, I need to create .catch, and inside the catch we want to catch the error. So here it's error, and in case we have any error we want to console.log that error, and also we want to exit the process. So process.exit and set it to 1. and save it. And our basically structure for the scraper process is now ready. Here will go the code of the scraper, and in case there are any errors, we will basically catch the errors, we will console them log, so we will see what's wrong, and also we will exit the process, so it's not stuck and running on your machine. So now let's go top here, and we can start setting up our browser. So first, we want to start with the browser, so const browser, and here we will await Playwright, and we want to use, for example, Chromium. So Playwright chromium.launch, and we want to launch with headless true. So this is the first step. We need to create a variable for a browser, and we want to get the Chromium from Playwright, and we want to launch the browser. Next step is to create the context, because we will be later modifying the context and we will be setting up the user agent to prevent getting tracked or targeted by anti-scraping secure software. So for that I'm gonna show you a little trick, but let's wait for that into the later videos. So now I'm just gonna create an empty context. So await browser, and the function is new context. Next, we finally need to create a page. So const page is equal to await context dot new page. And the new page, we want to pass it the value of bypass CSP content security policies and set it to true. And save it. And we are almost done. We have our browser, we have our context, and we have our page, which will be working with the website of the GitHub itself. And now we need to put some settings. So await page.set default timeout, and I'm gonna give it, for example, 30 seconds. And also I want to set the viewport size. So await page.set viewport size, and let's make it a little bit smaller so the script is running faster. So we have width, let's say 800, and height of 600, and save it. And of course the step number 1 is to load the page. So await page.goto base URL. Oops, this should be await, and save it. And that's pretty much it. Our browser is now set up, so let's just try to run it. So make sure we didn't have any typos, which is very common to do. So npm run scraper. And one typical mistake which we have just done, we forget to close the browser. So exit the process. And down here, we of course need to await browser.close. So don't forget to close the browser, because the Playwright will not do it automatically. This is the difference compared to Playwright test. So you always need to manually close the browser at the end. Otherwise, it will get stuck and open. So let's run the scraper again. And as you can see, our process is finished and everything has been successful because no error has been thrown into the console. So let me clear this. And again, quick recapitulation about the browser setup. First, we need to import or require Playwright. Then we can set the base URL, or technically you don't need to, you can just pass it here because we will be working with it just for one time. Then you create async function and you put the catch at the end. In the case our code will catch an error or get error, it will be displayed into console and the process will exit. Then you need to start with creating your browser. and we want to get the Chromium from Playwright and we want to launch it, and you can set some values. It can be, for example, headless. Then we need to create a context, which will later get more functional parameters, especially for the user agents. Then we create a page, and also we put it a bypass CSP and set it to true. Then we set our default timeout and viewport size, and we just go to the web page. And what's more important is browser.close, because since we are not using Playwright test, the browser will be not closed automatically. So let me just put some comments here. So set a browser, and here close browser, and save it. So we have a section of code separated. So that's it. And in the next video, I'm going to show you how to use the random user agent. So to make our scraper a little bit more robust and harder to detect by anti-scraping software, we can provide it with something like user agent, which basically simulates the real user and browser specification, location, etc. And for that, there is a node package called random user agent. And what's important is that it's random, because if you keep scraping with the same setup, it will be easily detected and you can be basically blocked and denied the connection to the website with your basic setup. And the random user agent will basically do this, that every run of the scraper will be run with a different configuration. So you will basically act like a different person and it will be not easier detected. So let me show you. First, we need to install dependency, and npm install random user agent. So that's it. If you now go to the package.json, you should see random user agent library installed into dependencies. So let's go back now to the scraper, and at the top we need to again import it. So const random user agent require random user agent. And now at the top we can specify a new part of the script, and I'm gonna name it create random agent. And here I want to create a variable called agent, and the function is random user agent dot get random, and save it. And now we can actually test this out. So down here, I'm gonna create console.log agent. And now if we run the script, and let's run it for 3 times, npm run scraper 3. See, we have console logged 3 user agents. First one is using Opera version 9 on the Macintosh. This one is using Mozilla on the Macintosh, and you can see Apple WebKit and a lot of information about the agent. And the third one is again using Mozilla, but on the Linux, etc. Chromium, Chrome, Safari, etc. So you can see every time we run the scraper, we will be getting this different information. So we will always look like someone new, and their tools will get harder to detect and prevent us from scraping the website, because we will always be looking like someone else, and especially someone real. So let me clear this. And now, how to actually use these values of the agent inside our script? Simple. In the context and browse a new context, we can pass a new value, and it's user agent, and pass it the value of agent, which we have created here. And this way, whenever we run the scraper, it will create new browser, new context, and inside that context it will use all the values which are generated by the random user agent, and that's information you have seen in the console. So it will take that operating system, the browser, the version, and it will set it to our browser. So our browser will basically always look differently each time we run the scraper. So let me now remove this. And there are only two parts left. And first one is get data from website. And the next one is store data into file. So save it. And that's pretty much it. In the next video, we will take a look on how to actually scrape the real data. And next, I'm going to show you how to store them into physical files. But for this video, that's enough. We have set up our random user agent. Now let's take a short break. And in the next video, we will start with the most important thing, and that is the actual data scraping. Finally, it's time to start on scraping the data. Again, it might look a little bit more complicated from the code, but after you do it for a few times, you'll actually see it's actually very easy and it makes complete sense. So, in the code, we will be basically scraping the GitHub repositories for Playwright. So I'm gonna start with creating a variable called repositories. And for that, we want to scrape all the basically files, or sorry, not files, the elements with the same selector. And for that, we need to use eval function with $2. So await page dot eval, because this will basically take all the selectors of the same element. So if there is like 50 elements of the same, it will basically get them all and not just the first one, or it will not throw error that there are multiple elements of the same value. So let's now go back to our browser, and I have already opened the inspect element, and you can actually see there is something called article, which takes the value of this whole card, and it has a class of border. So that's perfect element which we can use. So let's go back, and the element we want to eval is article with class of border. But now we need to pass a callback because we basically get all the repositories and now we need to do something with them. So I'm gonna name it, for example, repo cards, because what this will do will basically gives us all those, will basically gives us all the elements with this article. And I think there is 30 repositories on the site currently on the first page. So calling this await page eval will basically give us 30 repo cards. So what we want to do with them? In the callback, we want to use return repo card dot map, because we want to loop over them using map and actually split them into two elements or two values, one for repository and one for user. So, and the map basically access the card. So for each card in the repositories, I want to do something. And we want to create two variables, one for user, and the second one is the name of the repository. So for each card, I want to use query selector all, and if we take a look again, and if I scroll a little bit down, you can see it's H3 and A element, see? So I want to scrape these two values. So I'm trying to target selector of H3 and it's A. So basically what I'm doing is I'm getting all the repositories from the page by targeting article border. by using eval function. This will basically give me all the repositories. So each of the repository is now named something like card, because they are in like card values. And I want to iterate over all the cards, and I want to get the data from them so I can actually store them into the values. So from each of those cards, I want to get the user and its repository. And they are basically hidden under the selector of A3 and A. I hope this makes sense. So now I'm gonna create a small function which will help me to format the text. So I'm gonna create const format text, and basically the function takes some element which you want to format, and it will basically do element and element dot inner text dot trim. So this is just a custom function because I want to trim all the values so there are not spaces and blank in it, and everything will basically look much nicer. And now the final step is to return. And now I want to return the values for which I have just scraped. So first is user. So I'm gonna call format text user. Next is repo. So again, format text repo. And don't forget to put commas. And also I wanna return the URL, which is repo.ref. And save it. And that's basically it. This is our scraping script. Again, it might look a little bit complicated, but actually it's pretty simple and straightforward. So let me just go over it one more time. First, I create variable for repositories. This is all the cards which are on the GitHub page. And I want to get them all, which means I need to use eval with $2, which takes all the elements with article border. And because every card has article border, that means this will basically get all the repositories. And for each of the repositories, I want to basically name them the cards because each repository is represented by a card on the GitHub. I want to do something with them. And I want to iterate over them using map, which means for each of the cards, I want to basically scrape and get values for user and repo. They are hidden under the ML element of A3 and A. Then I have created my custom function, which don't need to be here, but I am get to use it because it's very helpful. And it will basically format the values by trimming them from the blank spaces, white spaces, etc. So we have nice text. And then we simply return the value for user, value for repo, and value for URL. So let's now try to console log it. So I'm gonna console log repositories. So now save it. And if I run the scraper, and as you can see, we have nicely scraped all the repositories. And as you can see, each of the cards contains the name of the user, name of the repository, and the URL to the GitHub project. So congratulations, you have successfully created your first scraper. And in the next video, I'm gonna show you how to actually store this data into the physical file. We will be using some text file, for example. And also I'm gonna show you how to actually, you can make them much more nicer to display. So that's it. This is your scraper. Basically, you can scrape anything you want from any website using the same pattern. In this case, we are just scraping the elements from the cards and we are extracting their username, their repository, and their link to the GitHub account. But you can do pretty much everything you want using the same patterns, just using different selectors or targeting different elements. So let me remove the console log. And in the next video, we'll take a look on how to store data into the files. So, final step, and let's take a look on how to store data into the file. And for that, we need to again at the top require one more library, but this one we don't need to install because we need to use file system package, which is inbuilt in your Node environment by default. So you don't need to install it, you just need to require it. So const fs and just require fs. This way we gain access to the file system functionality, so we can now read and write into the text files using Node.js. So down here, I want to create something called logger. So I'm gonna create a variable and name it logger. And now I want to create a write stream from file system library. So fs create write stream, and I'm gonna pass few values. The first one is the name of the file. In our case, it can be data.txt, and then we need to pass it a flag. In this case, I'm gonna pass the flag of write. So now if we use logger, we can actually write data into data.txt file. So if we now want to write data, we can simply use logger, and the function is write. And what we want to write? We want to write the repositories, but we want to stringify them by using JSON. So JSON.stringify and pass it the repositories. So save it. Let's now run the scraper. And as you can see, we have this data.txt file. And if you now open it, you can see that our data has been written into this file, but they are on the one line, which is good for taking less space, but it's not that readable. So what we can do with it? Well, don't worry, it's again pretty simple. We can just change this write function, and instead of just passing the repositories to JSON stringify, we can pass a few more parameters. And as you can see, we want to provide it with the replacer and the value. So first we're gonna pass null, and then simple space, just like this. And now if I open and run the scraper, you can see it ran successfully. And if I now take a look at the data.txt, you can see that our data are perfectly sorted and displayed in much more readable way. So that's it, just a quick recapitulation. If you want to store data, you simply create a logger using file system library, which you can import at the top, and you don't need to install any packages because it's inbuilt functionality from Node environment. Then you create a write stream function, you provide it with the name of your file which you want to create, give it a flag of W, which basically means write, or you can use A as append, which will basically add more data to the file with each run. Then you call logger.write and you JSON stringify name of your data which you want to store, and if you want to make it more readable, you simply pass null and space as another argument. And that's it.